Walter Morrison fell to his knees in the wreckage of his own home and screamed his wife's name. 79 years old, hands bleeding, heart breaking. Eleanor crawled through shattered glass to reach him, her white hair matted with blood, her eyes empty with shock. "I can't save us," Walter sobbed. "I can't save anything anymore." Then 4 Harley-Davidsons thundered into their destroyed driveway. The Hells Angels had arrived. Marcus Steele Thompson, the most feared man in Willowbrook, killed his engine, looked at the crying old couple, and spoke 5 words nobody expected. "Stop. I got this." Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. Subscribe and stay until the end. This story will leave you in tears. Now let's get back to what happened next. The tornado had passed through Willowbrook, Tennessee at 3:47 in the morning, and it had taken everything Walter Morrison spent his entire life building. Eleanor found him standing in what used to be their living room, staring at his purple heart medal, still hanging crooked on the only wall left standing. 45 years of marriage, 45 years in this house, gone in 11 minutes. "Walter," Eleanor's voice cracked. "Walter, please, we need to start cleaning." He didn't move, couldn't move. His hands, twisted by arthritis, hung at his sides like broken tools. "I built this house," he whispered, "with these hands. When I came back from Vietnam, I built it for us." "I know, sweetheart. And now look at it." His voice broke completely. "Look what I let happen to us." Eleanor grabbed his arm, her own hands bleeding from glass she'd been picking up since dawn. "You didn't let anything happen. It was a tornado, Walter, an act of God." "Then where is God now?" Walter turned to face her, and Eleanor saw something she'd never seen in 50 years of marriage: complete defeat in her husband's eyes. "Where is he when we're 79 and 76 with no roof, no savings, no children to help us? Where is he, Eleanor?" She had no answer. Their only son, Tommy, died in Iraq 15 years ago. The flag from his coffin was somewhere in that rubble. Their savings had been wiped out by Walter's cancer treatment last year. The insurance company had already called. Minimal coverage, maximum bureaucracy, money that wouldn't come for months. They were alone. Eleanor pulled her husband close, both of them crying in the ruins of their life. "We still have each other." "That's not enough anymore." Walter pulled away gently. "I'm 79 years old, Ellie. I can't rebuild a house. I can't even lift a damn beam." "Then we'll find help." "With what money? With what friends?" He gestured around at the empty street. "Look around. Everyone's dealing with their own damage. Nobody's coming to save us." He was right. The neighborhood looked like a war zone. The Hendersons had lost their garage. The Pattersons' fence was scattered across 3 lawns. Everyone was fighting their own battle. Nobody was coming. Walter walked to where a heavy beam had fallen across what used to be their bedroom doorway. He bent down, wrapped his twisted fingers around the wood, and pulled. Nothing moved. He pulled harder. His face turned red. His arms shook. A sound escaped his throat, half grunt, half sob. "Walter, stop, you'll hurt yourself." "I have to do something." He kept pulling, kept straining, kept failing. I can't just." His grip slipped. He fell backward into a pile of debris, landing hard on his hip. And there, in the wreckage of his own home, Walter Morrison, Vietnam veteran, father, husband, builder of this house, covered his face with his broken hands and wept. Eleanor dropped to her knees beside him. "Walter, please." "I'm useless," he choked. "I'm a useless old man who can't even protect his own wife." "That's not true." "It is true. Look at me." He held up his shaking hands. "These used to build things. These used to matter. Now they can't even hold a cup of coffee without spilling." Eleanor took his hands in hers, blood mixing with tears. "These hands held our son when he was born. These hands held me through every hard moment of our lives. These hands matter, Walter Morrison. Don't you dare tell me they don't." They held each other in the rubble, two old people who had survived wars and loss and cancer and 50 years of marriage, now facing something that felt insurmountable. That's when they heard the motorcycles. The sound cut through the morning silence like thunder, deep, rumbling, unmistakable. Eleanor's head snapped up. Walter's body tensed. "Get inside," he said immediately. "Walter!" "Now, Eleanor." She didn't argue. Everyone in Willowbrook knew what that sound meant. Everyone knew the stories about the Hells Angels chapter that operated out of the old warehouse on Route 7. Drugs, violence. A man named Steele who'd put 3 people in the hospital last year. Eleanor scrambled toward the damaged kitchen, but she didn't go inside. She stayed in the doorway, watching. 4 motorcycles pulled up to their destroyed driveway. 4 men in leather vests, patches gleaming in the harsh morning light. The one in front, brown hair, military tattoos covering both arms, eyes that looked like they'd seen things no person should see, killed his engine first. Marcus Steele Thompson surveyed the destruction. The collapsed roof, the scattered belongings, the old man sitting in rubble with tears on his face, the old woman bleeding from her hands in the doorway. Something shifted in his chest, something he'd been trying to bury for 20 years. Steele, the man behind him, Diesel, pulled up alongside. "What are you doing?" Steele didn't answer. He swung his leg off the bike, removed his leather jacket, and started walking toward the elderly couple. Walter scrambled to his feet, grabbing a piece of broken wood. His hands shook so badly he could barely hold it. "Stay back." Steele stopped, raised his palms. "Easy, old-timer." "I said stay back." Walter's voice cracked with fear and exhaustion. "We don't want any trouble. We don't have anything to steal." "I'm not here to steal anything." "Then what do you want?" Steele looked at the beam that had defeated Walter, looked at Eleanor's bleeding hands, looked at the purple heart still hanging on that crooked wall. "I want to help." Walter blinked. "What?" "I said I want to help." Steele took another step forward. Walter raised his makeshift weapon higher. "You're going to hurt yourself with that, old-timer, and you're going to hurt yourself worse trying to lift that beam alone. We can't pay you." "Didn't ask for payment." "Then what's the catch?" Steele was quiet for a moment. His eyes moved to the purple heart again. "No catch. Just saw you struggling. Figured you could use some hands. We don't need your kind of help." "My kind?" "You know what I mean." Walter's voice hardened despite his fear. "I know who you are. I know what that patch means. I've lived in this town for 45 years. I've heard the stories." "Stories?" Steele almost smiled. "Almost. You believe everything you hear?" "I believe my eyes. I believe a man doesn't get a reputation like yours by being a good Samaritan." Eleanor stepped out of the doorway. "Walter." "Stay back, Ellie." "Walter, look at him." "I am looking at him." "No." Eleanor walked toward them, ignoring her husband's protests. "Really, look at him." Steele stood perfectly still as the old woman approached. She was tiny, barely reaching his chest, with white hair that had probably been blonde once, and eyes that seemed to see straight through him. "You served," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Steele's jaw tightened. "How did you know?" "The way you stand, the way you watch everything at once, the way you hold your hands like you're still ready for something to happen." Eleanor's voice softened. "My son stood like that, after his first tour." "Ellie," Walter's weapon lowered slightly. "Don't." "Where did you serve?" Eleanor asked. Steele was quiet for a long moment. Behind him, his 3 brothers waited on their bikes, watching this strange confrontation unfold. "Afghanistan," he finally said. 2 tours, Marine Corps." "My son was Army, 2 tours in Iraq." "He make it home?" Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "He did, but he didn't really come home. You know what I mean." Steele knew. He knew exactly what she meant. "He killed himself 3 years after his discharge," Eleanor continued, her voice steady despite the tears. couldn't live with what he'd seen, couldn't find help, couldn't find peace. I'm sorry. Are you? Or is that just what people say? Steele met her eyes. I'm sorry because I almost did the same thing, twice. Because I know what it's like to come home and not be home. Because I spent 10 years trying to drink myself to death before I found something else. What did you find? He gestured at the three men behind him. Them, brothers, a reason to keep going. Eleanor turned to look at the bikers, a massive bald man covered in tattoos, a younger one with kind eyes who looked barely old enough to drink, an older one with gray in his beard and wisdom in his face. Those are your brothers? The only family I have left. Steele's voice was quiet. My blood family gave up on me a long time ago. These men, they didn't. Eleanor walked back to Walter and gently pushed down his makeshift weapon. He's telling the truth. Ellie, you can't know that. Yes, I can. She looked at her husband with 50 years of love and understanding. Because I spent 18 years watching our son carry the same weight this man is carrying. I know what it looks like. I know what it sounds like. And I know when someone is offering help because they need to give it, not because they want something in return. Walter stared at Steele. The biker stared back. Two men, two generations, two wars. You really just want to help? Walter's voice was barely a whisper. Yeah, old-timer, I really do. Walter looked at the beam he couldn't lift, at the roof he couldn't rebuild, at his shaking hands that had become useless. I don't understand. Why us? Why stop here? Steele walked to the beam, bent down, and lifted it easily. He carried it to the side of the yard and set it down carefully before turning back. Because I spent 20 years being the guy people cross the street to avoid. 20 years being everyone's worst nightmare. 20 years destroying things. He met Walter's eyes. Maybe I'm tired of destroying. Maybe I want to build something for once. From across the street, Mrs. Patterson watched through her curtain, phone already in hand. She'd called Sheriff Clayton the moment she saw the motorcycles. Help was coming. The kind of help she understood. But in the Morrisons' destroyed yard, a different kind of help was already beginning. Diesel killed his engine and walked over. What's the plan, Steele? We're clearing debris, sorting what can be saved from what can't. Steele turned to Walter. If that's okay with you. Walter looked at Eleanor. She nodded. I don't understand any of this, Walter said slowly. But I don't have much choice, do I? You always have a choice, old-timer. We can get back on our bikes right now if that's what you want. Walter was quiet for a long moment. Then he held out his shaking hand. My name is Walter Morrison. This is my wife, Eleanor. And I guess we could use some help. Steele shook his hand. Marcus Thompson. Most people call me Steele. These are my brothers, Diesel, Hawk, and Torch. Hell's Angels, Walter said. Never thought I'd be shaking hands with a Hell's Angel. Life's funny that way. Steele almost smiled again. Never thought I'd be helping rebuild a house at 7 in the morning. They started working. Steele directed his brothers with military precision. Diesel on heavy lifting. Hawk on sorting debris. Torch on cataloging what could be saved. Walter tried to help, but Steele stopped him. You're supervising. I can work. You can supervise. Steele's voice was firm but not unkind. You built this place. You know what's worth saving. We've got the muscle. You've got the knowledge. Fair? Walter wanted to argue, wanted to insist he could still contribute, but his hands were shaking too badly to grip anything, and they both knew it. Fair, he said quietly. Eleanor watched from the porch steps, still not quite believing what she was seeing. 4 Hell's Angels, the most feared men in Willowbrook, carefully handling her grandmother's china, gently setting aside family photographs, treating their broken possessions with more respect than the insurance adjuster had shown yesterday. Hawk found her jewelry box under a collapsed dresser. Instead of pocketing it, which she half expected, he dusted it off carefully and brought it to her. Ma'am, I think this might be important. Eleanor opened it with trembling hands. her wedding ring, Tommy's baby bracelet, a locket with pictures of her parents. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." Hawk ducked his head, almost shy. "Just doing what needs doing, ma'am." Sheriff Clayton's cruiser pulled up at 9:47 a.m., lights flashing. Mrs. Patterson had called 3 more times since the first one, each call more panicked than the last. "Steele," Clayton stepped out of his car, hand on his weapon. "What's going on here?" Steele didn't stop working. "Helping some neighbors, Sheriff." "Helping," Clayton's voice dripped with skepticism. "You and your boys decided to help some neighbors." "That's right, at 7 in the morning, after a tornado." "Seemed like a good time for it." Clayton walked closer, eyes scanning for anything illegal, any excuse to make an arrest. He found nothing but 4 men working and 2 old people watching. "Mr. Morrison," Clayton turned to Walter, "are you all right? Are these men threatening you?" Walter looked at Steele, who had stopped working and was watching the exchange with careful eyes. He looked at Diesel, who had his hands raised slightly as if expecting to be searched. He looked at Hawk and Torch, both standing very still. "No, Sheriff," Walter said. "They're not threatening us. They're helping." "Helping?" "That's what I said." "Mr. Morrison, do you know who these men are?" "I know exactly who they are." Walter's voice strengthened. "They're the only people who stopped. All morning, Sheriff. You drove by twice without stopping. The neighbors are all dealing with their own problems. The insurance company said they'd send someone within 2 weeks. These men, they stopped. They're working. They're helping." Clayton stared at Walter, then at Steele, then back at Walter. "If anything happens, then I'll call you. But right now, Sheriff, the only thing happening is my roof getting cleared." Walter pointed at the debris. "Unless you want to grab a hammer and help." Clayton's face reddened. He looked at Steele one more time, clearly wanting to find a reason to intervene, and finding none. "I'll be back to check on things." "I'm sure you will." The cruiser pulled away. Mrs. Patterson watched from her window, disappointed that there hadn't been an arrest. Steele returned to work. "Thanks, old-timer." "Don't thank me yet." Walter sat down heavily on what remained of his porch. "I still don't trust you." "Fair enough. But I trust what I see, and what I see is 4 men working while everyone else watches." Walter paused. "That counts for something." Eleanor appeared with a pitcher of lemonade. "Marcus, could you and your brothers take a break?" Steele looked at his watch. "They've been working for almost 3 hours." "Yes, ma'am, thank you." They sat on the destroyed porch, 4 bikers and 2 elderly people, drinking lemonade like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Marcus," Eleanor said, using his real name instead of his road name, "may I ask you something?" "Yes, ma'am." "What really made you stop? The truth." Steele was quiet for a long moment. He looked at his glass, at the wreckage around them, at Walter's purple heart still visible through the broken wall. "I saw him crying." "What?" "Your husband. I saw him fall trying to lift that beam. I saw him crying in the rubble." Steele's voice was rough. "My father cried like that once, when I was 18, when I told him I was enlisting. He begged me not to go, said he'd already lost too much, said the war would break me." "Was he right?" "Yeah," Steele nodded slowly. "He was right. The war did break me, and I was too proud to admit it, too proud to ask for help, too proud to go home when I came back wrong. So he died thinking I hated him, died before I could tell him he was right about everything." Eleanor reached over and took Steele's tattooed hand. "Seeing your husband," Steele continued, "it was like seeing my dad. Old man trying to do something his body wouldn't let him do anymore. Old man who needed help and had nobody. And I thought maybe this time I could actually do something. Maybe this time I could help instead of destroy." Walter cleared his throat. His eyes were wet. "Son," he said quietly, "I think your father would be proud of what you're doing today." Steele couldn't speak. He just nodded and went back to work. By noon, they'd cleared half the debris. Diesel had found the flag from Tommy's coffin, folded properly, and presented it to Eleanor with such reverence that she broke down crying. Hawk discovered that most of the plumbing was intact. Torch determined that the foundation was solid. The house could be rebuilt. "Mr. Morrison," Torch said, "you built one hell of a foundation. This place was meant to last." 45 years ago, Walter said, voice thick with emotion. "I poured that foundation the summer I came home from Vietnam. Told myself I was building something that would outlast anything the world could throw at me. Looks like you were right." Walter looked at the four men who had transformed his mourning from despair to something like hope. "I don't know how to thank you." Steele shook his head. "Don't need thanks, just need you to let us keep helping." "Why? You've already done more than anyone else. Why keep going?" Steele looked at his brothers, at the destroyed house, at the old couple who had lost everything except each other. "Because the job's not done." That night, after the bikers left with promises to return at dawn, Walter found Eleanor sitting on their mattress, pulled from the debris, miraculously undamaged, staring at the stars through the hole in their ceiling. "Strange day," he said. "Strange day," she agreed. "Do you really trust them?" Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. "I trust what I saw in that young man's eyes. The same thing I saw in Tommy's eyes. The same thing I see in yours sometimes." "What's that?" "Someone looking for a reason to keep going." She took his hand. "Maybe helping us is his reason." Walter thought about Steele lifting that beam like it weighed nothing. Thought about the way he'd carefully set aside Eleanor's grandmother's china. Thought about the tears in the biker's eyes when he talked about his father. "Maybe we're all looking for reasons," Walter said quietly. "Maybe that's all any of us are doing." Across town, in a dim office above a construction company, Frank Garrison studied photographs of the Morrison property. He'd been waiting for an opportunity like this. Elderly homeowners, destroyed property, no immediate family. Easy targets. He picked up his phone. "Yeah, it's Garrison. Those bikers you told me about? They're still at the Morrison place. 4 of them. Working." He listened, then smiled. "No, I don't think there'll be a problem. But let's make sure. Send someone to deliver a message. Nothing too obvious. Just discourage them from staying too long." He hung up and looked at the photographs again. Nobody was going to interfere with his business. Not 4 bikers. Not anyone. Steele's motorcycle wouldn't start. He'd gotten up at 5 in the morning, earlier than he'd woken up for anything in years, and now he was standing in the parking lot of the Hells Angels clubhouse, staring at 4 slashed tires. "What the hell?" Diesel walked over, coffee in hand, and stopped dead. "Steele, look at your bike." "I see it. All 4 of us." Diesel pointed at the other motorcycles. "Every single one had been sabotaged. Someone came here last night. Someone cut every tire we own." Hawk emerged from the clubhouse, still pulling on his jacket. "Who would be stupid enough to—" He saw the damage. Oh. Torch was the last one out. He didn't say anything, just walked around the bikes examining the cuts, reading the damage like a story. "Professional," Torch said finally. "Clean cuts, same angle on each tire. This wasn't some drunk kid. Someone sent a message." Steele's jaw tightened. "I know who sent it." "Who?" "Doesn't matter right now." Steele pulled out his phone. "What matters is we told those old people we'd be back at dawn. It's almost 6. They're probably already wondering where we are." "We can't ride on slashed tires, Steele." "Then we'll drive." Steele was already dialing. "I know a guy with a truck." 45 minutes later, a beat-up Ford F-150 pulled into the Morrisons' driveway. Walter was standing on what remained of his porch, arms crossed, face unreadable. "Thought you weren't coming." Steele jumped out of the truck bed. "Ran into some trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "The kind with a knife and a grudge." Steele walked past Walter toward the debris pile. "Doesn't matter. We're here now." Walter grabbed his arm. "Son, if helping us is putting you in danger—" "Everything puts me in danger, old-timer. That's not new." Steele met his eyes. Question is, are we working today or not? Walter held his gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded. We're working. Eleanor appeared in the doorway with fresh coffee. She took one look at Steele's face and knew something was wrong. What happened? Nothing, ma'am. Marcus. Her voice carried the same tone she'd used on Tommy when he tried to hide things. What happened? Steele almost smiled. Someone slashed our tires last night. All 4 bikes. Oh my God. It's fine. We borrowed a truck. It's not fine. Eleanor set down the coffee tray harder than necessary. Someone attacked you because you're helping us. We don't know that for sure. Don't we? Steele didn't answer. They both knew she was right. Diesel started unloading tools from the truck bed. Steele, we need to talk about this. Later. Steele! I said later. Steele grabbed a hammer and headed toward the damaged wall. Right now we work. The morning passed in tense silence. Steele threw himself into the labor with an intensity that worried Eleanor. He barely spoke, barely rested, barely acknowledged anyone. Walter watched him carefully. He'd seen that kind of energy before, in himself, in his buddies who came back from Vietnam with demons they couldn't name. Marcus. Steele didn't stop hammering. Marcus. Nothing. Walter walked over and physically grabbed the hammer. Steele spun on him, eyes wild for just a moment before recognition set in. Jesus. Steele stepped back. Sorry. I'm sorry. Sit down. I'm fine. That wasn't a request. Walter pointed at an overturned bucket. Sit. Steele sat. Walter lowered himself onto a pile of lumber, his joints protesting every inch. For a long moment, neither man spoke. How bad was it? Walter finally asked. How bad was what? Over there, Afghanistan. Steele's hands clenched. Bad enough. I figured. Walter pulled something from his pocket, his Purple Heart. He held it in his weathered palm, studying it like he'd never seen it before. You know why they give you these? Because you got wounded. Because you survived getting wounded. Walter turned the metal over. I got this in '69. Shrapnel in my back. Killed 2 guys standing right next to me. I was 22 years old. Steele was quiet. Spent the next 30 years wondering why I lived, and they didn't. Spent 30 years waking up at night, hearing their voices, seeing their faces. You know what finally helped? What? Walter looked at him directly. Building this house. Not because building it fixed anything, but because building it gave me something to do with my hands when my mind wanted to destroy me. Steele stared at the metal. I can't build things. I only know how to break them. Bullshit. Steele's head snapped up. What do you call what you're doing right now? Walter gestured at the work around them. What do you call what you did yesterday? You're building, son. You're building something that matters. It's just a house. It's never just a house. Walter's voice cracked. It's a man's legacy, his proof that he existed, that he contributed, that he left something behind. You're helping me save my legacy, Marcus. That's not nothing. That's everything. Steele couldn't speak. His throat had closed up. Eleanor appeared with sandwiches. She took one look at both men's faces and understood immediately. Lunchtime, she said gently. No arguments. They ate together on the broken porch, 4 bikers and 2 elderly people, sharing food in silence and something that felt almost like peace. Then Sheriff Clayton's cruiser pulled up again. Here we go, Diesel muttered. Clayton stepped out, but this time he wasn't alone. A man in an expensive suit climbed out of the passenger seat, carrying a clipboard and wearing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison? The suit walked forward with his hand extended. Frank Garrison, Garrison Construction. I heard about your situation and wanted to offer my services. Walter didn't take his hand. We didn't call any contractors. No. Consider this a courtesy visit, a neighborly gesture. Garrison's smile widened. I've been helping families all over town recover from the storm. Very reasonable rates, professional work, guaranteed quality. We already have help. Garrison looked at the four bikers like he was seeing them for the first time. Ah, yes, I see. His voice dripped with false concern. Mr. Morrison, are you aware of who these men are? I'm aware. The Hells Angels aren't exactly known for their construction skills. They're known for, well, let's just say other things. Garrison stepped closer to Walter, lowering his voice conspiratorially. I've heard some concerning rumors. These men may be using your property for purposes you're not aware of. Drug storage, weapons, the kind of things that could get an innocent homeowner in serious trouble. Steele stepped forward. You want to say that to my face? Marcus, Walter held up his hand. I've got this. He turned to Garrison with 50 years of hard-earned dignity in his posture. Mr. Garrison, I spent 3 years in Vietnam watching men die. I learned how to spot a con man before he opens his mouth. You're a con man. Garrison's smile flickered. Mr. Morrison, I'm simply trying to... You're trying to scare an old couple into signing a contract they don't need because you think we're too stupid to know better. Walter's voice hardened. I may be 79 years old, my hands may shake, but my mind is sharp and my bullshit detector works just fine. Now, Mr. Morrison, get off my property. Garrison's mask slipped completely. For just a moment, his eyes showed something cold and calculating. You're making a mistake, Mr. Morrison. These men will take advantage of you. They'll steal from you. I said, get off my property. Sheriff Clayton shifted uncomfortably. Frank, maybe we should... Sheriff, you're not going to do anything about this? Garrison pointed at the bikers. They're operating without permits, without licenses. This is illegal construction. Clayton looked at Steele, looked at the work they'd done, looked at Walter and Eleanor, standing united against this threat. I don't see any construction, Frank. I see neighbors helping neighbors. Garrison's face reddened. This isn't over. It is for today. Clayton took his arm and steered him toward the cruiser. Let's go. As they drove away, Garrison twisted in his seat to stare at Steele through the back window. The message was clear. This was far from over. That guy's trouble, Diesel said. I know. He's the one who slashed our tires, isn't he? Steele watched the cruiser disappear around the corner. Probably. So what do? We keep working. Steele picked up his hammer, and we watch our backs. The afternoon brought more progress and more neighbors. Tom Bradley from the hardware store showed up with extra supplies. On the house, he said, though Steele suspected it was more complicated than that. My wife thinks I'm crazy, Bradley admitted. Donating materials to a project run by the Hells Angels. So why do it? Bradley looked at Walter and Eleanor, who were sorting through salvaged belongings together. Because I've known the Morrisons for 30 years. They were the first people to welcome us when we moved to town. Eleanor brought us a casserole. Walter helped me fix my garage door. He shrugged. Good people deserve good things, even if the help comes from unexpected places. Mrs. Patterson appeared at the property line around 3 o'clock. She didn't come closer, just stood there watching with her arms crossed. Eleanor noticed first. I'll handle this. She walked over to her neighbor of 40 years and Steele watched the conversation he couldn't hear. Mrs. Patterson gestured at the bikers. Eleanor gestured back. Mrs. Patterson shook her head. Eleanor said something that made the other woman go very still. When Eleanor walked back, she was wiping her eyes. What happened? Steele asked. I told her about Tommy, about what he went through, about what I see in you. Eleanor's voice was thick. I told her that if my son had found people who accepted him, people who gave him purpose, maybe he'd still be alive. What did she say? She said she'd pray for us. Eleanor almost laughed. From her, that's practically a declaration of friendship. By evening, they'd made remarkable progress. The debris was cleared, the damaged walls were stabilized. Torch had created a detailed plan for the rebuild that would preserve the house's original character while making it stronger than before. Mr. Morrison, Torch said, spreading out his sketches on the porch. You built this place to last. The bones are solid. The foundation is perfect. With the right materials and enough time, we can make this house better than new. Walter stared at the drawings. His eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. How long? 3 weeks if we push. A month if we're careful. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. Steele cut him off. We're offering. But why? Why would you spend a month of your lives on strangers? Steele was quiet for a moment. He looked at his brothers, at the house they'd already transformed, at Eleanor, who was watching him with those eyes that saw too much. Because you're not strangers anymore, he said finally. You're family. Walter made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Family. Hell's Angels calling an old Vietnam vet family. Life's full of surprises, old-timer. That it is, son. That it is. That night, Steele sat in the borrowed truck outside the clubhouse, staring at his slashed motorcycle. The others had gone inside, but he couldn't bring himself to move. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered anyway. Yeah? Mr. Thompson. Garrison's voice slithered through the speaker. I hope I'm not disturbing you. What do you want? To offer you an opportunity. You and your friends have skills, initiative. Those are valuable things. Garrison paused. I could use men like you. The pay is excellent. The work is simple. All you have to do is stop helping the Morrisons. Steele's grip tightened on the phone. You called to bribe me? I called to make you a business offer. The Morrisons are a lost cause anyway. They're old. They're broke. That house will be condemned within 6 months regardless of what you do. Why waste your time? Because it's the right thing to do. Garrison laughed. The right thing? How quaint. His voice hardened. Let me be clear, Mr. Thompson. I've been in business in this town for 15 years. I have relationships, influence. You have a criminal record and a leather jacket. If you continue to interfere with my operations, I will make your life extremely difficult. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Garrison's voice turned silky again. Think about my offer. The money is real. The alternative is unpleasant. The line went dead. Steele sat in the darkness for a long time, phone in his hand, mind racing. Garrison wasn't just a con man. He was connected. Dangerous. The kind of man who didn't make threats he couldn't back up. The smart thing would be to walk away, let the Morrisons fend for themselves, protect his brothers from whatever Garrison had planned. Steele thought about Walter's Purple Heart, about Eleanor's son who didn't make it home, about the look on the old man's face when he called them family. He got out of the truck and walked into the clubhouse. We have a problem. His brothers gathered around as he explained Garrison's call. When he finished, there was silence. So what do we do? Hawk asked. Do we back off? Diesel cracked his knuckles. Hell no. Nobody threatens us. He's not just threatening us, Steele said. He's threatening the Morrisons. If we stay, we put them in the crossfire. Torch spoke for the first time. Then we make sure the crossfire never reaches them. How? By being smarter than he is. Torch leaned forward. Garrison thinks he's dealing with thugs. Let him keep thinking that. Meanwhile, we document everything, every threat, every bribe attempt, every piece of evidence that he's been scamming people. And then we take him down. Steele looked around at his brothers, at the men who had become his family when his real family abandoned him, at the people who followed him into every fight, every danger, every unknown situation. This could get ugly, he warned. Diesel grinned. Brother, we're Hell's Angels. Ugly is our specialty. The next morning, Steele arrived at the Morrison property at dawn to find Walter already awake, sitting on the porch with a shotgun across his lap. Old-timer? Steele approached carefully. Everything okay? Someone was here last night. Walter's voice was tight. Didn't see them, but I heard them. Moving around the property, checking things. Did you call the sheriff? Sheriff Clayton said he'd increase patrols, but we both know that won't do much. Steele sat down beside him. Garrison called me last night, offered me money to stop helping you. Walter's grip tightened on the shotgun. What did you say? I said no. You should have said yes. Steele turned to look at the old man. What? I'm serious, Marcus. Walter's eyes were haunted. I've lived a good life. I've seen my share of trouble. I don't need you boys getting hurt on my account. That's not your call to make. The hell it isn't. This is my house, my property, my fight. Wrong. Steele's voice was firm. It stopped being just your fight the moment we decided to help. You don't get to push us away because you're scared of what might happen. I'm not scared for myself. I'm scared for you, for your brothers, for Eleanor. Walter's voice cracked. I already buried one son. I can't bury another. Steele went very still. One son? Walter seemed to realize what he'd said. He looked away, but it was too late. You called me son yesterday, Steele said quietly. I thought it was just an expression. Maybe it started that way. Walter still wouldn't meet his eyes. But I've been watching you work, watching how you treat Eleanor, watching how you look at that purple heart like you understand exactly what it means. He finally turned to face Steele. My boy Tommy, he was like you, strong, damaged, looking for something to believe in. He never found it before the demons took him. But you're finding it, right here, right now. Mr. Morrison, Walter, just Walter. Steele swallowed hard. Walter, I'm not your son. I'm a convicted felon with a rap sheet and a bad reputation. I'm not somebody you should want in your family. You want to know what I see when I look at you? Walter set down the shotgun and took Steele's hands in his trembling ones. I see a man who had every reason to be selfish and chose to be generous. A man who could have ridden past our wreckage and chose to stop. A man who's fighting his own demons while helping an old couple fight theirs. His voice broke. I see my son, the man Tommy could have become if he'd had brothers like yours, if he'd had purpose like you're building here. Steele's vision blurred. 20 years of walls he'd built around his heart started cracking. I don't know how to be anyone's son, he whispered. My own father died thinking I hated him. Then let me tell you something my father told me before I shipped out to Vietnam. Walter squeezed his hands. Being a son isn't about blood. It's about showing up, about fighting for something bigger than yourself, about letting people love you even when you don't think you deserve it. He smiled through his own tears. You've been doing all of those things since you pulled into our driveway, Marcus. You've been a son, you just didn't know it. Eleanor found them there an hour later, still sitting on the porch, not talking anymore, but not needing to. Some conversations end in words, others end in understanding. She brought coffee and didn't ask questions. That was Eleanor's gift, knowing when silence said more than speech. The other bikers arrived at 7, and work resumed. But something had shifted. The tension that had characterized the past 2 days was still there, but underneath it was something stronger. Purpose, belonging, family. Sheriff Clayton showed up at noon, but this time he wasn't there to check on the bikers. Got some news, he said, pulling Steele aside. That call you told me about last night? I did some digging on Garrison. And 14 complaints in the past 6 months, all from elderly homeowners, all claiming overcharges, unfinished work, or outright theft. Clayton's jaw tightened. I couldn't do anything because nobody would press formal charges. They were all too scared. But now I have a recording of him attempting to bribe you, and I have your testimony about the tire slashing. Clayton handed Steele his card. Document everything from here on out. Dates, times, witnesses. When we have enough, we're going to shut him down. Why are you helping us? I thought you hated the Hells Angels. Clayton was quiet for a moment. My son served in Iraq, came back wrong, like a lot of them do, got into trouble, made bad choices. He met Steele's eyes. A group of veterans at the VA helped him get straight. Most of them were ex-cons, ex-addicts, men society had given up on. They saved my boy's life. He extended his hand. I learned something from watching them. Sometimes the people we're taught to fear are the ones most capable of helping. Steele shook his hand. We won't let you down, Sheriff. I know you won't. As Clayton drove away, Diesel approached with a concerned expression. Steele, we have another problem. What now? Check the lumber pile. Steele walked over and immediately saw what Diesel meant. Half their wood supply had been contaminated overnight. Something poured on it, oil or chemicals, that made it unusable for construction. Garrison? Diesel asked. Steele nodded slowly. He's escalating. So what do we do? Steele looked at the contaminated wood, at the work still left to do, at Walter and Eleanor, who were watching from the porch with worried faces. We keep going. With what materials? Steele pulled out his phone. Leave that to me. An hour later, a massive truck pulled up loaded with fresh lumber. The driver stepped out, a huge man with a beard that reached his chest and arms covered in military tattoos. Steele! He grabbed Steele in a bear hug. Been too long, brother. Who is this? Walter asked. Steele grinned. Everyone, meet Bear. We served together in Afghanistan. He runs a lumber yard in the next county. When Steele called and said he needed help, Bear said, unloading materials with ease, I figured it was for something stupid. Then he told me about you folks. He nodded at Walter. Vietnam? 3 tours. Bear snapped a salute. Thank you for your service, sir. This lumber's on me. Consider it a gift from one veteran's family to another. Walter's voice shook. That's too much. We can't. You can and you will. Bear cut him off with a smile. Steele saved my life twice overseas. This doesn't even begin to repay that debt. As the materials were unloaded, more help arrived. 2 veterans Bear had called, a retired contractor who owed Steele a favor, a group of young people from the local community college studying construction. By evening, the Morrison property was transformed. What had been 4 bikers and 2 old people was now a crew of 15, all working together toward a common goal. Eleanor stood on the porch, watching the organized chaos with wonder. How did this happen? She asked Steele. 2 days ago, we were alone. Now look at this. Steele watched his brothers working alongside strangers who were quickly becoming friends. Watched Walter laughing with Bear about some long-ago military mishap. Watched a community being built alongside a house. It happened because you let us help, he said. Because you took a chance on people everyone else had given up on. We didn't give up on you. We didn't know you. That's the point, Steele turned to face her. You judged us by what we did, not by what people said about us. That's rare. That's valuable. That's why people are showing up. Eleanor took his hand. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll let us help you too. Not just with work, with whatever you're carrying, whatever keeps you up at night. Her eyes were fierce with maternal love. You saved Walter's life the moment you stopped your motorcycle. Let us save yours. Steele couldn't speak. He just nodded. From across the street, Mrs. Patterson watched the growing crowd of workers. She pulled out her phone, hesitated, then put it away. For the first time in 2 days, she didn't call the sheriff. That night, as the volunteers departed and the bikers prepared to leave, Garrison's black SUV drove slowly past the property. He didn't stop, didn't get out, just drove by, watching, calculating. Steele watched him go, knowing that whatever came next would be bigger than slashed tires and contaminated wood. The battle lines had been drawn, and neither side was backing down. Day 5 started like every other day that week. Steele arrived at dawn, Walter was already awake, and Eleanor had coffee ready before anyone asked. But something was different about Walter this morning. His face looked gray. His breathing seemed labored. When he stood up to greet the bikers, he had to grab the porch railing for support. You okay, old-timer? Steele watched him carefully. Fine, just tired. Walter waved the concern. Old age catches up with you. Maybe you should rest today. Rest? Walter's voice hardened. This is my house, Marcus, my life's work. I'm not sitting on the sidelines while other men rebuild it. Steele knew that tone. He'd used it himself plenty of times. The voice of a man too proud to admit weakness, too stubborn to accept help he hadn't earned. At least take it easy. Supervise from the porch. I'll supervise from wherever I damn well please. Eleanor appeared in the doorway, her expression worried. Walter, maybe Marcus is right. You've been pushing yourself too hard. Not you too. Walter kissed her cheek and headed toward the work area. I survived 3 tours in Vietnam. I think I can handle some light construction. Steele exchanged a look with Eleanor. Neither of them liked what they saw, but neither knew how to stop a 79-year-old man from working on his own property. The morning progressed with its usual rhythm. Diesel and Bear worked on framing the new walls. Hawk organized materials. Torch supervised the electrical work with Mike Chen. And Walter insisted on helping lift support beams despite everyone's protests. Walter, let me get that. Steele reached for a beam the old man was struggling with. I've got it. You don't have to prove anything. I'm not proving anything. Walter's jaw tightened. I'm contributing, there's a difference. Steele backed off. He understood pride. He understood needing to matter. But watching Walter strain against weight his body couldn't handle made his stomach turn. It happened at 11:47 a.m. Walter was helping Diesel position a support beam when his face went completely white. He made a sound, not quite a word, not quite a scream, and his hand flew to his chest. Walter? Diesel caught him as he crumpled. Steele, something's wrong. Steele was across the yard in 3 seconds flat. Walter was on the ground, clutching his chest, his eyes wide with terror and pain. Can't breathe, Walter gasped. Chest burning. Call 911. Steele dropped to his knees beside the old man. Now. Hawk was already on the phone. Eleanor came running from the house, screaming her husband's name. Steele's training kicked in. 2 tours in Afghanistan. Countless wounded soldiers. He'd done this before, but never with someone who felt like family. Walter, look at me. Steele grabbed his face with both hands. Look at me. You're having a heart attack. I need you to stay calm. Eleanor. Walter's voice was barely a whisper. Tell Eleanor. You'll tell her yourself. Don't you dare give up on me. Steele started chest compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. The rhythm was automatic. Diesel, get Eleanor back. She doesn't need to see this. No! Eleanor fought against Diesel's arms. Let me go! Walter! Walter! Ma'am, please. Diesel's voice cracked. Let Steele work. He knows what he's doing. Steele kept compressing. His arms burned. Sweat poured down his face. He counted out loud to keep himself focused, to drown out Eleanor's screams, to ignore the possibility that he might be pumping the chest of a dead man. Come on, Walter. Come on. He checked for a pulse. Nothing. Hawk, how far out is the ambulance? 20 minutes. 20 minutes? Steele's blood ran cold. He doesn't have 20 minutes. They're sending a helicopter too, but nothing. We keep him alive until they get here. Steele resumed compressions. Diesel, I need you to take over. My arms are cramping. They switched positions seamlessly. Diesel had the same training. All of them did. But Steele couldn't step back. He knelt by Walter's head, holding the old man's hand, talking to him even though he couldn't hear. You listen to me, old-timer. You don't get to die in your own front yard. Not like this. Not when we're this close to finishing your house. His voice broke. You called me son. You don't get to leave me now. 12 minutes in, Walter's body jerked. Diesel stopped compressions. Steele checked his pulse. I've got something. Faint, but it's there. Thank God. Diesel sat back, exhausted. Walter's eyes fluttered open. He looked confused, disoriented, but alive. What happened? You had a heart attack. Steele squeezed his hand. Don't move, help is coming. Eleanor. I'm here. She pushed past everyone and dropped to her knees beside her husband. I'm right here, Walter. I'm not going anywhere. Walter's shaking hand found hers. Scared. You scared the hell out of me. Tears streamed down her face. Don't you ever do that again. Trying not to. The helicopter arrived at 18 minutes. The paramedics took over, loading Walter onto a stretcher, while Eleanor refused to leave his side. Ma'am, you can ride with us. The lead paramedic helped her into the helicopter. Are you his wife? 50 years. Eleanor clutched Walter's hand. 50 years and I'm not stopping now. Steele watched the helicopter lift off, feeling like part of himself was going with it. Around him, the other workers stood in shocked silence. Bear had tears running into his beard. Hawk looked like he might throw up. What do we do now? Diesel asked quietly. Steele stared at the sky until the helicopter disappeared. His hands were still shaking from the compressions. His shirt was soaked with sweat. We wait, he said, and we pray. The hospital waiting room felt like a tomb. Steele sat with his hands clasped between his knees, staring at the floor, replaying every moment of the past 5 days. Had he pushed Walter too hard? Should he have been more insistent about resting? Could he have seen this coming? Marcus, Diesel sat down beside him. This isn't your fault. I should have made him stop. Nobody makes Walter Morrison do anything. You know that. I should have tried harder. You kept him alive. Diesel's voice was firm. 23 minutes of CPR. The paramedic said if you hadn't started compressions immediately, he wouldn't have made it to the helicopter. You saved his life, Steele. Don't forget that. Steele couldn't respond. The weight of the past few hours pressed down on him like a physical force. 3 hours later, a doctor emerged from the surgical wing. Steele jumped to his feet. Mrs. Morrison? Eleanor rose slowly, her face aged 10 years since this morning. Is he? He's alive. The doctor smiled gently. He had a major cardiac event, but we were able to stabilize him. He's going to need surgery, a triple bypass, but his prognosis is good. Eleanor's legs buckled. Steele caught her before she hit the floor. Thank God. She clutched Steele's arm. Thank God. The quick response made all the difference. The doctor turned to Steele. You performed CPR? Yes, sir. Your technique was textbook perfect. 2 more minutes without intervention, and we'd be having a very different conversation. The doctor shook Steele's hand. You saved his life, young man. Steele couldn't speak. He just nodded. They let Eleanor see Walter first. Steele waited in the hallway, leaning against the wall, trying to process everything that had happened. Marcus, he turned. Sheriff Clayton was walking toward him, hat in hand, expression unreadable. Sheriff, I heard what happened. Clayton stopped a few feet away. Heard what you did? I did what anyone would do. No, Clayton shook his head. You did what a trained professional would do, what a soldier would do, what a good man would do. He extended his hand. I owe you an apology. Steele stared at the offered hand. For what? For assuming I knew who you were based on a patch and a rap sheet. For treating you like a criminal instead of a person. Clayton's voice was rough with emotion. My son was right. He's been telling me for years that I judged too quickly. Today proved him right. Steele shook his hand. We all make assumptions, Sheriff. It's human nature. Maybe, but some assumptions are more damaging than others. Clayton released his grip. Is there anything I can do? For the Morrisons, I mean. Actually, there is. Steele's mind was already working again. Garrison's going to use this. He's going to say we're dangerous, that we caused Walter's heart attack, that we should be shut down. Let him try, No, Steele cut him off. Don't protect us. Investigate him. Really investigate him. Talk to the families he scammed. Get their stories on record. Build a case. That could take time. Walter's going to be in the hospital for a while. We have time. Steele's jaw tightened. But when he gets home, I want him to come back to a finished house in a town that's free of Frank Garrison. Clayton nodded slowly. Consider it done. Eleanor appeared in the hallway, her face tear-stained but peaceful. He wants to see you. Steele's chest tightened. Me? You. Eleanor took his hand. He's asking for his son. Steele followed her into the room on legs that didn't feel steady. Walter lay in the hospital bed, connected to machines that beeped and hummed, but his eyes were alert and focused. Marcus. Hey, old-timer. Steele's voice came out rougher than intended. Gave us quite a scare. Gave myself one too. Walter's laugh turned into a cough. Doctor says I've got a few more years left in me, thanks to you. I just did what... Don't. Walter's hand found Steele's. Don't minimize it. You saved my life. I was dead on that lawn, Marcus. I could feel myself slipping away. And then I heard your voice. His eyes filled with tears. You told me I didn't get to die. You told me I called you son. You told me I didn't get to leave you. Steele's vision blurred. You heard that? Every word. Walter squeezed his hand with surprising strength. And you were right. I don't get to leave. Not yet. Not when I finally have a son again. Steele broke. 20 years of walls. 20 years of isolation. 20 years of believing he was unworthy of love. All of it crumbled in a hospital room in Tennessee. He bent over the bed and wrapped his arms around the frail old man who had given him something he thought he'd lost forever. Thank you, Steele whispered. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for not letting me. Eleanor watched from the doorway, tears streaming down her face. She'd lost one son to war and grief. She wasn't going to lose another. The next morning, Steele arrived at the hospital to find a crowd gathered outside Walter's room. Mrs. Patterson was there with a casserole. Tom Bradley brought flowers. 3 families he didn't recognize stood with cards and gifts. What's going on? Steele asked Eleanor. Word got out. She was smiling through her exhaustion. About what you did. About Walter. About everything. She gestured at the crowd. These are all people Garrison scammed. They heard a Hell's Angel saved an old man's life, and they wanted to come show support. A woman approached Steele, clutching a homemade card. Mr. Thompson? I'm Mary Chen. Frank Garrison took $12,000 from my mother last year, promised to fix her roof, never finished the job. I'm sorry to hear that, ma'am. I wanted to thank you, Mary's eyes were wet, for standing up to him, for helping the Morrisons, for showing this town that good people come in unexpected packages. One by one, they introduced themselves. Richard Santos, whose wheelchair ramp was never built despite full payment. Patricia Williams, whose storm damage estimate was inflated by 300%. James and Dorothy Hoffman, who lost their entire savings to Garrison schemes. By noon, Steele had collected 14 names, 14 families, 14 victims willing to testify. He called Sheriff Clayton. I've got witnesses. How many? 14 so far, and I haven't even started looking. Clayton was silent for a moment. That's enough to open a formal investigation, possibly enough for charges. Do it. Today. Steele, these things take time. Walter Morrison almost died yesterday. Frank Garrison has been terrorizing this town for years. How much more time do you need? Another pause, then. I'll have a warrant by end of day. Steele hung up and found Eleanor watching him with an expression he couldn't read. What? He asked. You're different, she said softly, than when you first pulled into our driveway. Something's changed. Steele thought about the past 5 days. The work, the threats, the fear, Walter's heart attack, the moment in the hospital when he finally let himself feel something other than anger. Maybe I found something worth fighting for. Eleanor hugged him. Maybe you did. That afternoon, Steele returned to the Morrison property to find Garrison waiting for him. The contractor leaned against his black SUV, arms crossed, smile fixed in place. Mr. Thompson, I heard about the unfortunate incident yesterday. Steele stopped 20 feet away. Get off this property. I wanted to express my condolences. Heart attacks are so unpredictable, especially for elderly men under stress. Garrison's smile widened. Perhaps this tragic event will convince you to reconsider my offer. Your offer to stop helping innocent people while you rob them blind? Garrison's expression flickered. I see you've been talking to the locals, collecting stories, playing detective. He pushed off the SUV and took a step closer. Be careful, Mr. Thompson. Stories can be dangerous things. They can be twisted, misrepresented, made to say things they never meant. Is that a threat? It's advice. Garrison reached into his jacket. Steele tensed, but all he pulled out was a business card. My lawyer's contact information. You're going to need it. Why's that? Because I'm filing complaints tomorrow. Unlicensed construction, safety violations, trespassing, harassment. Garrison dropped the card on the ground at Steele's feet. By the time I'm finished, you and your biker friends will be facing charges that make your existing rap sheets look like parking tickets. Go ahead. Garrison blinked. Excuse me? File your complaints, call your lawyers, do whatever you need to do. Steele stepped closer, close enough to see the fear beneath Garrison's confidence. Because while you're playing legal games, Sheriff Clayton is executing a warrant on your office, right now, as we speak. The color drained from Garrison's face. You're lying. Call your secretary. Ask her who's going through your files. Garrison's hands shook as he pulled out his phone. He dialed, waited. His expression shifted from disbelief to horror. Shirley? What's happening? Who's? He listened. His jaw tightened. Get me everything in the safe, now, before they… He listened again. What do you mean they already… He hung up and stared at Steele with naked hatred. You have no idea what you've done. I know exactly what I've done. Steele didn't flinch. I've protected people who couldn't protect themselves. I've stood up against a bully who thought he was untouchable. I've done what I wish someone had done for my father when con men took advantage of him. This isn't over. No, it's not. Because tomorrow I'm going to visit every person you've scammed. I'm going to help them organize. I'm going to make sure they know their rights and have access to legal support. Steele smiled, and it wasn't friendly. By the time this is over, Frank Garrison, you're going to wish you'd never heard the name Morrison. Garrison climbed into his SUV, tires squealing as he fled. Diesel emerged from behind the house. That was intense. You heard? Every word, Diesel grinned. Did Clayton really get a warrant? Signed an hour ago. Hot damn. Diesel clapped Steele on the shoulder. We're actually going to take this guy down. We're going to try. Steele looked at the half-rebuilt house. But first, we finish what we started. That night, Steele sat in Walter's hospital room, reading aloud from a construction manual while Eleanor dozed in the chair beside her husband. Marcus. Walter's voice was weak but alert. Yeah? What happens when the house is done? Steele set down the manual. What do you mean? I mean you and your brothers. You'll move on. Find another project, another town. Walter's eyes were sad. This will end. Steele was quiet for a long moment. He'd been avoiding this question, even in his own mind. The house would be finished in 2 or 3 weeks. The Garrison situation would resolve one way or another. And then what? Back to the clubhouse? Back to the emptiness he'd been running from? I don't know, he admitted. I haven't thought that far ahead. Maybe it's time to start thinking. What are you saying? Walter reached out and took Steele's hand. I'm saying this town needs people like you. People who stand up. People who fight for what's right. People who don't back down when things get hard. The town is terrified of us. The town was terrified of you, past tense. Walter squeezed his hand. You changed their minds, Marcus. One act of kindness at a time. One saved life at a time. One rebuilt home at a time. It takes more than a few good deeds to change a reputation. You're right. It takes consistency, commitment. It takes putting down roots and showing up day after day, year after year, until people see you for who you really are. Walter's voice softened. Stay. Build something here. Not just houses, a life, a family, a legacy. Steele stared at the old man, who had become more of a father to him in 5 days than his own father had been in 38 years. I don't know how, he whispered. Then let us teach you. Eleanor's voice came from the chair. She wasn't sleeping after all. Let us teach you what family looks like, what roots feel like, what it means to belong somewhere. Steele looked between them. 2 people who had lost their only son. 2 people who had welcomed 4 strangers into their lives. 2 people who were offering him something he'd spent 20 years convincing himself he didn't need. I'll think about it, he said finally. That's all we ask, Walter smiled. Just think about it. But as Steele drove back to the clubhouse that night, he wasn't thinking. He was feeling. For the first time in decades, he was allowing himself to feel something other than anger and loss and isolation. And it terrified him more than any battlefield ever had. The following morning, the Willowbrook Gazette ran a front-page story. Sheriff investigates local contractor for fraud. Garrison's face was plastered beneath the headline, looking nothing like the confident predator Steele had confronted. By noon, 6 more victims had come forward. By evening, the number was 23. And in a hospital room across town, Walter Morrison opened his eyes and said the first words of his recovery. Is that bastard going to jail? Eleanor laughed through her tears. Welcome back, sweetheart. Is he? It's looking that way. Good. Walter's smile was weak but genuine. Now someone get Marcus on the phone. We've got a house to finish. Walter came home on a Tuesday, 12 days after his heart attack, to a house he didn't recognize. Eleanor had insisted on keeping it a surprise. She'd forbidden Steele from sending photos, banned visitors from describing the progress, even confiscated Walter's phone when he tried to call Hawk for updates. Now he stood in his driveway, supported by Steele on one side and Eleanor on the other, staring at what used to be ruins. This can't be. The house was complete. New roof, new porch, fresh paint in the same shade of blue Eleanor had chosen 45 years ago. The wheelchair ramp Diesel had built ran along the side, gentle enough for Walter's recovery. But that wasn't what made Walter's legs buckle. It was the people, 50 of them, maybe more, lined up on both sides of the walkway, holding signs and flowers and homemade cards. Tom Bradley from the hardware store, Mrs. Patterson in her Sunday best, the 14 families Garrison had scammed, Bear and his crew from the lumber yard, Sheriff Clayton in full uniform, and at the front, standing at attention like soldiers waiting for inspection, were Diesel, Hawk, and Torch. What is this? Walter's voice cracked. Welcome home, old-timer. Steele's arm tightened around him. Your community wanted to say thank you. Thank me? For what? Mrs. Patterson stepped forward, the same woman who'd called the police 5 times in 1 week. The same woman who'd watched through her curtains with suspicion and fear. For showing us what courage looks like, Mr. Morrison. Her voice trembled. For letting these young men help you when the rest of us were too scared to get involved. For reminding us that neighbors are supposed to take care of each other. She handed him a card, hand-painted, a house surrounded by motorcycles, with the words, "Welcome home," written in a child's careful handwriting. My granddaughter made that, Mrs. Patterson said. She's been asking every day when Mr. Walter is coming back. Walter couldn't speak. He clutched the card to his chest like it was made of gold. One by one, they approached. Mary Chen, whose mother Garrison had scammed, brought a fruit basket. Richard Santos rolled up in his wheelchair, the one he'd bought himself after Garrison never built his ramp, and shook Walter's hand with tears in his eyes. You started something, Mr. Morrison. You and these bikers. You showed us we don't have to be victims. I didn't start anything. I just needed help. That's exactly what you started, Richard smiled. You asked for help. You accepted it. You let people see that needing help isn't weakness. Do you know how many of us were too proud to admit we'd been scammed? Too ashamed to tell anyone? Steele watched the procession with something burning in his chest. This wasn't just a homecoming. This was a community being reborn. Diesel appeared at his elbow. You seeing this, brother? I'm seeing it. This is what we did. You understand that? This is what happens when people like us decide to give a damn. Steele nodded slowly. He understood. For the first time in his life, he really understood. The celebration moved inside, where the women of Willowbrook had prepared enough food to feed an army. Walter sat in his new recliner, a gift from the hardware store, and received visitors like a king holding court. But his eyes kept finding Steele. Every few minutes across the crowded room, the old man would look at the biker who had saved his life, and something would pass between them that didn't need words. Sheriff Clayton pulled Steele aside around noon. Got some news. Good or bad? Depends on your perspective. Clayton lowered his voice. Garrison was arrested this morning. Federal charges. Turns out his scams crossed state lines, which made it FBI territory. Steele's heart jumped. Federal charges? Wire fraud, mail fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy. Clayton smiled grimly. He's looking at 15 to 20 years. What about the families he scammed? That's the good news. The feds seized his assets, bank accounts, property, everything. The victims will get restitution. Not all of it, but most. Steele leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. It's over. The Garrison part is over. Clayton studied him carefully. The question is, what comes next? For you, for your brothers, for this community. What do you mean? I mean, you've done something here that most people never accomplish. You've changed minds, changed hearts, changed the way an entire town sees you. Clayton paused. That's not something that happens by accident. That's not something that ends when the last nail is hammered. Sheriff, I'm not sure what you're... I'm saying stay. Clayton's voice was firm. I'm saying this town needs people like you. Not the Hells Angels the rumors talk about. The Hells Angels I've seen working on this property for 2 weeks. The ones who saved an old man's life. The ones who stood up to a bully when everyone else was too scared. Steele stared at him. You want us to stay? I want you to consider it. Clayton clapped him on the shoulder. Talk to your brothers. Think about what you could build here. Not just houses, a future. He walked away, leaving Steele alone with questions he wasn't ready to answer. That evening, after the last guest had departed and the food was put away, Steele found Walter on the new porch, staring at the sunset. Beautiful, isn't it? Walter didn't turn around. Used to watch sunsets from this spot every night. Thought I'd never see one from here again. Steele sat down beside him. How are you feeling? Tired, happy, confused. Walter chuckled. Mostly confused. About what? About how much things have changed. Walter finally turned to look at him. 12 days ago, I was a dying old man with a destroyed house and no hope. Tonight, I'm sitting on a brand new porch, surrounded by neighbors who finally learned how to be neighbors, with a son I never expected to find. Steele's throat tightened. Walter, I've been thinking about what you asked me in the hospital, about what happens when the house is done. You don't have to. Let me finish. Walter's voice was gentle but firm. I've been thinking about it, about you, about what I saw in you the moment you stepped off that motorcycle. What did you see? Myself. Walter's eyes were wet. I saw myself, the young man I was when I came back from Vietnam. Angry, lost, looking for a reason to keep fighting because fighting was all I knew how to do. Steele couldn't speak. I found my reason in this house, in Eleanor, in building something that would last. Walter reached over and took Steele's hand. But I was alone, Marcus. I didn't have brothers. I didn't have a crew. I didn't have anyone who understood what I'd been through. Walter, you have that. You have men who would die for you. Men who followed you into this mess without asking why. Walter squeezed his hand. Don't waste that. Don't let that bond disappear into bar fights and meaningless rides. Use it. Build something. something that matters. Steele's voice came out as a whisper. I don't know how. Yes, you do, Walter smiled. You've been doing it for 2 weeks, helping people, protecting people, standing up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. His grip tightened. That's your gift, Marcus. That's your purpose. You just needed someone to show you. Steele broke. For the second time in 2 weeks, the walls he'd built around his heart came crashing down. He bent forward, shoulders shaking, and let Walter hold him the way a father holds a son who's finally found his way home. I'm scared, Steele admitted. I'm scared of staying, of putting down roots, of having something I could lose. Of course you're scared. That's how you know it matters. Walter's voice was thick with emotion. But here's the secret no one tells you, son. The things worth having are always the things that terrify us most. They sat together on the porch until the stars came out. Eleanor joined them eventually, bringing blankets and hot chocolate, not asking questions, just being present. A family. Not by blood, not by birth, by choice. And somehow that made it stronger. The next morning, Steele called a meeting. Diesel, Hawk, and Torch gathered in the Morrisons' living room, curious but patient. They'd learned to trust Steele's instincts over the years. Whatever this was about, it was important. I've been doing some thinking, Steele started, about what happens next. Back to the clubhouse? Hawk asked. Back to the regular runs? Maybe, or maybe something different. Steele paced the room. Sheriff Clayton offered us something yesterday. A chance to stay, to build something here. Diesel leaned forward. Stay? In Willowbrook? In Tennessee? In this community? Steele stopped pacing and faced his brothers. Look, I know this isn't what we signed up for. I know we came here to help an old couple and then move on. But something happened. Something changed. What changed? Torch asked quietly. I changed. Steele's voice caught. I spent 20 years destroying things, fighting, running, pretending I didn't need anyone or anything. And then I met Walter and Eleanor, and they showed me something I forgot existed. What's that? Family. Steele looked at each of his brothers. Real family. The kind that doesn't give up on you. The kind that sees who you could be instead of who you were. The room was silent. I'm not saying we abandon the club. I'm not saying we forget who we are. Steele sat down heavily. I'm saying maybe we can be more. Maybe we can use what we have, our skills, our brotherhood, our willingness to do the hard things, for something better than bar fights and territory disputes. Hawk spoke first. What exactly are you proposing? A community service division, Hell's Angels who help instead of hurt, who respond to emergencies, who protect the vulnerable, who show up when everyone else walks away. Diesel laughed. You want to turn us into Boy Scouts? I want to turn us into what we should have been all along. Steele's voice hardened. Warriors with a purpose. Soldiers with a mission. Brothers who fight for something instead of just fighting. Torch, who had been silent throughout, finally spoke. I've been riding with the club for 32 years. I've seen a lot of changes, a lot of ups and downs. He looked at Steele with something like pride. This is the first time I've seen a real chance for us to become something better. So you're in? I've been in since you pulled over for that old man. Torch smiled. I was just waiting for you to figure out why. Hawk nodded slowly. I didn't join the club to hurt people. I joined because I needed brothers, because I needed purpose. He met Steele's eyes. If this is our new purpose, I'm in. Everyone looked at Diesel. He sat back, arms crossed, expression unreadable. For a long moment, no one breathed. Then he grinned. Hell, Steele, you think I'm going to let you idiots do this without me? He stood up and grabbed Steele in a bear hug. I'm in. Let's change the damn world. Relief flooded through Steele. His brothers, his family, they were with him. Now the real work could begin. Word spread fast. Within a week, the idea of a Hell's Angels Community Service Division had reached chapters across 3 states. Some laughed. Some cursed. Some called Steele a traitor to everything the club stood for. But others listened. Bear called from his lumberyard with news that 2 veterans in his chapter wanted to volunteer. A group in Nashville reached out about starting something similar. Even the state Hells Angels president requested a meeting, not to shut them down, but to understand. "You've created something," Sheriff Clayton told Steele during one of their now regular meetings. "Something that could spread. Or something that could fail spectacularly. Always a possibility," Clayton smiled. "But failure isn't the worst thing that can happen. The worst thing is never trying at all." Steele thought about Walter, about Eleanor, about the moment he'd pulled over on that random morning and decided to help instead of ride by. "No," he agreed, "the worst thing is riding past someone who needs you." The formal organization took shape over the following weeks. They called it the Community Emergency Response Alliance, CERA for short. 4 Hells Angels and a growing number of volunteers committed to helping families in crisis. The first official call came on a Thursday afternoon. "Steele," Sheriff Clayton's voice was urgent, "got a situation. Elderly woman on Maple Street. Her husband passed away last month, and she's been struggling alone. Neighbors called because they haven't seen her in 3 days. Address? 714 Maple. Her name is Dorothy Hoffman. She was one of Garrison's victims." Steele remembered her. A tiny woman with silver hair who'd shaken his hand at Walter's homecoming and thanked him with tears in her eyes. "We're on it." 15 minutes later, Steele and Diesel arrived at Dorothy's house. The mail was piled up. The newspaper sat untouched on the porch. Every curtain was drawn. Steele knocked. No answer. "Dorothy? Mrs. Hoffman? It's Marcus Thompson. We met at the Morrison house." Silence. Diesel checked the back door. Locked. Steele knocked again, harder this time. "Dorothy, if you can hear me, please let us know you're okay. We're worried about you." A faint voice from inside. "Go away." Relief and concern flooded through Steele simultaneously. "Dorothy, I'm not leaving until I know you're safe. Can you come to the door?" "I said go away." Steele looked at Diesel. "Something's wrong. Break it down?" "Not yet." Steele pressed his face close to the door. "Dorothy, I'm going to sit right here on your porch until you're ready to talk. I've got nowhere else to be. Take your time." He sat down against the door, his back to the wood, and waited. An hour passed. Diesel brought water. Steele didn't move. 2 hours. The sun began to set. Steele stayed. Finally, just as darkness was falling, he heard the lock click. The door opened a crack. Dorothy's face appeared, thin, pale, tear-stained. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. "You're still here." "I said I would be." "Why? Why do you care about an old woman you met once?" Steele stood slowly, carefully, not wanting to scare her. "Because someone cared about me when I didn't deserve it. Because that's what community means. Because you matter, Dorothy, even if you've forgotten that." Her face crumpled. The door swung open. Steele caught her as she collapsed into his arms, sobbing. "I can't do it anymore," she choked. "I can't live without him. 62 years, and now he's gone. And I don't know how to wake up in the morning without him beside me." "I know." Steele held her like she was made of glass. "I know it hurts, but you're not alone. You hear me? You're not alone anymore." Diesel called Eleanor. Within an hour, the Morrisons' living room was full again, not with celebration this time, but with care. Dorothy sat wrapped in blankets eating soup Eleanor had made, surrounded by people who refused to let her disappear. "This is what you built," Walter told Steele quietly, watching the scene unfold. "This is what you created. We created it, all of us. But you started it, that first day, that first choice to stop." Walter's eyes were fierce with pride. "Never forget that, Marcus. Every person helped, every life touched, every moment of connection. It all started because you decided to give a damn about 2 old strangers." Steele watched Dorothy smile for the first time in days, as Mrs. Patterson told her a story about her own husband's terrible cooking. Maybe that's enough, Steele said quietly. Maybe that's all any of us can do. Start something. Trust that others will continue it. That's exactly enough. Walter gripped his arm. That's everything. 3 days later, Dorothy moved into the Morrisons' guest room. Temporarily, she insisted, just until she got back on her feet. But everyone knew the truth. She'd found family. Just like Steele had. Just like the whole damn town had. And that was worth more than any house. The invitation arrived in early October, 3 weeks after CERA's official founding. Mr. Thompson, the letter was formal, printed on official state government letterhead. Governor Harrison requests your presence at a ceremony honoring community service excellence. Your work with the Community Emergency Response Alliance has been nominated for the Tennessee Spirit Award. Steele read it 3 times to make sure he wasn't hallucinating. What is it? Diesel grabbed the letter. His eyes went wide. Holy cow. Steele, this is the governor. I know. The actual governor wants to give you an award. I can read, Diesel. Hawk whooped. Torch smiled that quiet smile of his. And Walter, who'd been pretending not to eavesdrop from his recliner, couldn't contain himself any longer. Did I hear that right? The governor? You heard right. Steele still couldn't quite believe it. Some kind of community service award. Well, of course. Walter struggled to his feet, waving off Eleanor's protests. Of course the governor noticed. You think something like this stays hidden? 4 Hell's Angels transforming a whole town's perception of what bikers can be? Walter, sit down. I will not sit down. Walter crossed the room and grabbed Steele's shoulders. I will stand right here and tell you that this is exactly what you deserve. What all of you deserve. You changed this town, Marcus. You changed lives. You changed history. It was a group effort. Every great achievement is a group effort. That doesn't make the leader less important. Walter's eyes were wet. I'm proud of you, son. More proud than I've ever been of anyone in my life. Steele's vision blurred. I couldn't have done it without you. And I couldn't have survived without you. Walter pulled him into a hug. Isn't that the point? Isn't that what family means? We need each other. We lift each other. We become more together than we could ever be alone. Eleanor joined the hug. Then Diesel. Then Hawk and Torch. Even Dorothy Hoffman, watching from the doorway, found herself wrapped into the embrace. 6 people. 5 weeks ago, they were strangers. Now they were something else entirely. They were home. The ceremony was scheduled for the first week of November. Steele spent the intervening days doing what he'd come to love most, helping people. A roof repair for a single mother. A yard cleanup for a disabled veteran. A food delivery for an elderly couple who couldn't leave their home. Each task small, each task meaningful. Each task proof that the Hell's Angels could be more than their reputation suggested. The night before the ceremony, Steele sat alone on the Morrisons' porch, watching the stars. Can't sleep either? He turned. Eleanor stood in the doorway, wrapped in her robe, holding 2 cups of coffee. Mind if I join you? Please. She settled into the chair beside him, handing over one of the cups. For a while, neither spoke. I've been thinking about Tommy, Eleanor finally said. Our son, the one we lost. Steele tensed. Eleanor, you don't have to. I want to. Her voice was steady. I've been thinking about him because of you, because of what you've done here, because of who you've become. I'm not trying to replace him. I know, Eleanor smiled gently, and you couldn't. He was his own person, with his own struggles, his own demons. But Marcus, you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. What's that? Hope. She reached over and took his hand. Hope that his death wasn't meaningless, that the lessons we learned from losing him, about grief, about compassion, about reaching out to people who are suffering, could help someone else. Eleanor, you're proof, Marcus, proof that people can change, proof that second chances matter, proof that the right support at the right time can save a life. her eyes filled with tears. Tommy didn't have that. He didn't have brothers who understood. He didn't have a community that embraced him. He didn't have what you have. He had you. He had Walter. We weren't enough. We didn't know how to reach him. Eleanor's voice broke. But watching you, watching what you've built, it helps. It helps me believe that Tommy's struggle taught us something, that we became the people who could help you because we failed to help him. Steele couldn't speak. His throat had closed completely. I guess what I'm trying to say is, thank you. Eleanor squeezed his hand. Thank you for letting us love you. Thank you for saving Walter's life. Thank you for showing this town what redemption looks like. She paused. Thank you for giving an old woman a second chance at being a mother. Steele broke. He pulled Eleanor into a hug and held her while they both cried. Tears of grief and gratitude and healing all mixed together. When they finally pulled apart, the first light of dawn was painting the sky. Big day today, Eleanor said, wiping her eyes. Yeah, Steele's voice was rough. Big day. You ready? He looked at the house he'd helped rebuild, at the community he'd helped transform, at the family he'd found in the most unexpected place. Yeah, he said, I think I finally am. The morning of the governor's ceremony, Steele stood in front of the Morrisons' bathroom mirror, trying to tie a necktie for the first time in 15 years. You're doing it wrong. He turned. Walter stood in the doorway, already dressed in his best suit, leaning on the cane he still needed for balance. I know. Steele held up the mangled fabric. I've been doing it wrong for 20 minutes. Walter walked over slowly, took the tie from Steele's hands, and began working on it himself. His arthritic fingers moved with practiced ease. My father taught me this knot, Walter said quietly. The day before my wedding, said a man should know how to tie his own tie, but sometimes it's okay to let someone help. Sounds like a wise man. He was. Died when I was 42. Heart attack like the one I had. Walter's hands paused. I think about him a lot lately, about what he'd say if he could see all this. What do you think he'd say? Walter finished the knot and stepped back, examining his work. I think he'd say the same thing I'm about to say. He met Steele's eyes. I'm proud of you, son. More proud than words can express. Steele's vision blurred. Walter, let me finish. Walter's voice was thick but determined. A month and a half ago, you were a stranger who pulled into my driveway. Today, you're receiving an award from the governor of Tennessee, but that's not why I'm proud. Then why? Because the award isn't what matters. The cameras, the ceremony, the recognition, none of it matters. Walter gripped Steele's shoulders. What matters is who you've become. What matters is the lives you've touched. What matters is the man standing in front of me right now. Steele couldn't speak. You saved my life, Marcus. Not just physically, you saved my soul. You gave an old man a reason to keep fighting when he'd given up. Walter's eyes overflowed. You gave me back my son. Steele pulled him into a hug. Two men, two generations, two veterans who'd found each other when they needed it most. I love you, Steele whispered. I never thought I'd say that to anyone again, but I love you, Walter. You and Eleanor both. We love you too, son. Walter's voice broke completely. We love you too. Eleanor found them there 5 minutes later, still holding each other, both crying like children. She didn't say anything, just wrapped her arms around them both and joined in. Family. The convoy to Nashville was unlike anything Willowbrook had ever seen. 50 motorcycles, 50 Hell's Angels from chapters across Tennessee, all riding to honor one of their own. Steele led the formation, with Diesel, Hawk, and Torch flanking him, their bikes polished to a mirror shine. Behind them came the cars. Walter and Eleanor in Sheriff Clayton's cruiser, Tom Bradley and his wife, Mrs. Patterson and Dorothy Hoffman sharing a ride, Mary Chen and her mother, Richard Santos, in his specially modified van. The whole town, it seemed, was making the journey. You see this? Diesel's voice crackled through the radio. Look behind us, Steele. Steele glanced in his mirror. The convoy stretched back as far as he could see. I see it. That's for you, brother. All of that is for you. Steele couldn't respond. His throat had closed up completely. They arrived at the state capitol to find a crowd already gathered. Reporters, photographers, local politicians eager to be seen at a feel-good event. But Steele barely noticed them. His eyes found the banner hanging above the entrance. Tennessee Spirit Awards, honoring those who serve. You ready? Hawk appeared beside him. No, Steele took a deep breath. But I don't think I'll ever be ready, so let's do this anyway. They walked into the building together. 4 Hell's Angels in dress clothes, still wearing their leather vests over their suits. Steele had insisted on that. He wasn't going to pretend to be something he wasn't. The ceremony hall was packed. Steele was guided to the front row, where seats had been reserved for the Morrison family and the CERA founding members. He sat between Eleanor and Diesel, his knee bouncing with nervous energy. Marcus, Eleanor took his hand. Breathe. I'm trying. You've faced down terrorists in Afghanistan. You've performed CPR on a dying man. You've stood up to corrupt contractors and skeptical sheriffs. She squeezed his fingers. This is just a room full of people who want to celebrate you. That's what terrifies me. Eleanor laughed softly. I know, but you'll survive, I promise. The ceremony began with speeches. The lieutenant governor talked about community service. A state senator discussed the importance of volunteer organizations. A representative from FEMA praised disaster response initiatives across the state. Steele barely heard any of it. His mind was racing through the past 6 weeks. The storm, the rubble, Walter's tears, Eleanor's bleeding hands. The first time he lifted that beam and felt something other than anger for the first time in years. And now, the announcer's voice cut through his thoughts. We present the Tennessee Spirit Award for Outstanding Community Service to Marcus Thompson and the Community Emergency Response Alliance. Applause erupted. Steele's legs wouldn't move. Diesel elbowed him. Get up there, brother. I can't. You can. Walter's voice was firm. You can and you will. Now move. Steele stood. His legs felt like they belonged to someone else. He walked to the stage, climbed the steps, and faced the crowd. Governor Harrison smiled warmly and handed him the award. A crystal sculpture shaped like the state of Tennessee, with Spirit Award etched into the base. Mr. Thompson, the governor said, would you like to say a few words? Steele looked at the award in his hands, looked at the crowd watching him, looked at Walter and Eleanor, who were holding hands and crying openly. I don't deserve this. The crowd went quiet. The governor's smile flickered. I'm serious. Steele's voice was rough but steady. I don't deserve this award because I didn't do anything special. I just stopped. He paused, gathering his thoughts. 6 weeks ago, I was riding through Willowbrook, and I saw an old man crying in the ruins of his house. I could have kept riding. I almost did. But something made me stop. Steele's voice cracked. That was the only special thing I did. I stopped. Everything else was just showing up, day after day, doing what needed to be done. He looked at his brothers in the front row. Diesel, Hawk, Torch, they stopped with me. They could have kept riding too. They didn't. Steele's eyes found Bear in the crowd. Bear drove 3 hours to bring us lumber. He didn't have to. Sheriff Clayton could have arrested us that first day. He chose to give us a chance instead. His gaze moved to the Willowbrook contingent. Tom Bradley donated supplies from his store. Mrs. Patterson brought food to people she'd been afraid of for years. Mary Chen and her mother organized victim support groups. Richard Santos testified against a man who scammed him, even though it meant admitting he'd been fooled. Steele held up the award. This belongs to all of them. This belongs to everyone who chose to stop, everyone who chose to help, everyone who chose to see people instead of stereotypes, potential instead of reputation, humanity instead of fear. He found Walter's eyes. 6 weeks ago, a man I'd never met looked at me, a Hell's Angel with a criminal record and a bad reputation, and saw a son. He didn't know me. He had every reason to be afraid of me, but he chose to see something else. He chose to give me a chance. Steele's voice broke completely. Walter Morrison saved my life. He and Eleanor gave me something I thought I'd lost forever. A family, a purpose, a reason to keep going. Tears streamed down his face. This award isn't mine, it's theirs. Everything good that's happened in the past 6 weeks is because 2 old people decided to trust a stranger. He stepped back from the microphone. The hall was silent. Then Walter Morrison stood up. His legs shook. Eleanor tried to help him, but he waved her off. Using his cane for support, the 79-year-old Vietnam veteran made his way to the stage steps. Walter, what are you? Help me up there, son. Steele reached down and pulled Walter onto the stage. They stood side by side, the biker and the old man, facing a crowd that had no idea what to expect. Walter took the microphone. I've got something to say. His voice was stronger than Steele had heard in weeks. My name is Walter Morrison. I'm 79 years old. I served 3 tours in Vietnam. I built my house with my own 2 hands, and 6 weeks ago, I almost died in that house's ruins because I was too proud to admit I needed help. The crowd was mesmerized. This young man saved my life, not just during my heart attack, though he did that too, with CPR that kept me alive for 23 minutes until the helicopter arrived. He saved my life by stopping, by caring, by showing me that the family I thought I'd lost wasn't gone forever. Walter's eyes filled with tears. I lost my son 15 years ago, Tommy, killed in Iraq. He was a good boy, a brave boy, but he came back from war damaged, and we couldn't reach him, and we lost him to his own demons. Walter's voice cracked. I spent 15 years grieving, 15 years angry at the world, 15 years certain I would die without ever having a son again. He turned to Steele. Then this man pulled into my driveway, this Hell's Angel, this stranger, this broken warrior who'd been running from his own pain for 20 years. Walter gripped Steele's arm. And I saw Tommy, not the Tommy who died, the Tommy who could have lived, the man my son might have become if he'd found brothers who understood, if he'd found purpose, if he'd found a family that wouldn't let him give up. The crowd was crying now, half the room at least. Marcus Thompson didn't just rebuild my house. He rebuilt my heart. He rebuilt my hope. He rebuilt my belief that good things can happen to people who've given up on good things. Walter's voice rose. And he did it not because he was paid, not because he was ordered, but because he chose to. Because stopping to help a stranger is what real men do. He held up Steele's award. This belongs to everyone who stopped, everyone who helped, everyone who chose love over fear, compassion over judgment, humanity over hatred. Walter's eyes swept the crowd. But most of all, it belongs to the man standing next to me, the son I never expected to find, the best thing that's happened to me since the day I married Eleanor 50 years ago. He turned and pulled Steele into a hug, right there on stage, in front of the governor and the cameras and the entire state of Tennessee. I love you, son, Walter said, loud enough for the microphone to catch. And I'm proud of you. And I thank God every single day that you stopped. The crowd erupted. Not just applause, a standing ovation, people crying, cheering, embracing each other. Steele held Walter and let the tears come. He'd spent 20 years running from love, running from family, running from anything that could hurt him. He wasn't running anymore. The reception after the ceremony was overwhelming. Politicians wanted photos, reporters wanted interviews, strangers wanted to shake his hand and thank him for inspiring them. But Steele only wanted one thing: Eleanor. He found her in a quiet corner, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course, sweetheart." Steele led her away from the crowd, through a side door, into an empty hallway. They stood together in the silence, the noise of the reception muffled behind them. "I have to ask you something." "Anything." Steele pulled a small box from his pocket. Eleanor's eyes widened. "This isn't what you think." Steele opened the box, revealing a simple gold band. "This was my grandmother's wedding ring. She gave it to me before she died, told me to give it to someone who deserved it. Marcus, I've carried it for 20 years. 20 years of never meeting anyone I wanted to give it to. 20 years of believing I'd die alone." Steele's voice shook. "But then I met you and Walter, and I realized I'd been wrong the whole time." Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. "I want you to have this, not as a wedding ring, I know you have one of those, but as a symbol, a promise." Steele pressed the box into her hands. "A promise that I'm not going anywhere, that you and Walter are my family now, that whatever comes next, we face it together." Eleanor opened the box with trembling fingers. The gold caught the light. "It's beautiful. It's yours, if you'll have it." Eleanor looked up at him with eyes full of tears. "Marcus Thompson, you foolish, wonderful man." She pulled him down and kissed his forehead. "Of course I'll have it. Of course you're family. You've been family since the moment you stepped off that motorcycle." She slipped the ring onto her right hand, next to her wedding band. "There." She held up her hand. "Now it's official." Steele laughed through his tears. "Thank you for everything, for believing in me, for giving me a chance, for showing me what real family looks like. Thank you for letting us love you." Eleanor cupped his face in her hands. "That's the hardest part, you know, not giving love, receiving it. You learned how to receive it, Marcus. That's the bravest thing you've ever done." They stood together in the quiet hallway, mother and son in everything but blood. "Now," Eleanor straightened his tie, "there's someone else who wants to talk to you. A young woman named Grace Sullivan. She's been asking about you all afternoon." Steele blinked. "Who?" "Third-grade teacher at Willowbrook Elementary. Apparently her students wrote you a thank you card for helping the community." Eleanor smiled knowingly. "She's lovely, blonde hair, kind eyes, single, from what I hear." "Eleanor, I'm not—" "Oh, hush. You're exactly ready." She pushed him toward the door. "Go find her. She's wearing a blue dress. And try to smile. You look like you're heading to a funeral." Steele found himself back in the reception before he could argue. His eyes scanned the crowd automatically, finding Walter surrounded by admirers, Diesel charming a group of state senators, Hawk and Torch deep in conversation with FEMA representatives. And there, near the refreshment table, a woman in a blue dress with blonde hair and the kindest eyes he'd ever seen. She looked up. Their gazes met. Something shifted in Steele's chest. Something he thought had died a long time ago. "Mr. Thompson?" She walked toward him with her hand extended. "I'm Grace Sullivan. My students wanted me to give you this." She handed him a handmade card covered in crayon drawings. Motorcycles, houses, hearts, stick figures with smiles. "They've been talking about you for weeks, about how the bikers helped Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, about how sometimes heroes don't look the way you expect them to." Grace's smile was warm. "They wanted you to know they think you're pretty cool." Steele stared at the card, blinked back the moisture in his eyes. "Tell them," his voice caught, "tell them thank you. Tell them this means more than the governor's award." "I will." Grace paused. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you stop? That first day, what made you pull over?" Steele thought about the question. He'd asked himself the same thing 1,000 times over the past 6 weeks. "I saw an old man crying," he finally said, "and I saw myself, the man I'd become, the man I didn't want to be anymore." He met her eyes. "I stopped because I needed to stop, because something inside me was broken, and I didn't know how to fix it." "Did helping fix it?" "Yeah, Steele smiled, a real smile, maybe the first one in years. Yeah, I think it did. Grace smiled back. Well, Mr. Thompson, if you ever want to talk about it more, my students aren't the only ones who think you're pretty cool. She walked away before Steele could respond, but she glanced back once, and that glance held a promise of something new. Eleanor appeared at his elbow, grinning. I told you she was lovely. Don't start. I wouldn't dream of it, but her eyes sparkled with matchmaking intent. 2 years later, Steele stood on the Morrisons' front porch, watching a crew of volunteers put finishing touches on Dorothy Hoffman's newly renovated home across the street. So much had changed. So much had grown. CIRA now operated in 15 counties with over 300 volunteers. The Hells Angels Community Service Division had chapters in 12 states. Steele had testified before the state legislature about volunteer disaster response. He'd been interviewed by national news networks. He'd received letters from veterans across the country thanking him for showing them another path. But the biggest change was personal. Daddy! A blonde blur raced across the yard and launched herself at Steele's legs. 3-year-old Emma Thompson, named after Mrs. Patterson's granddaughter who'd made that first welcome home card, giggled as Steele swung her into the air. Hey, Princess, where's Mommy? Helping Grandma make cookies. Steele carried Emma inside, where Grace was indeed helping Eleanor arrange fresh-baked cookies on a plate. His wife looked up and smiled. There you are. Walter's been asking for you. Where is he? On the deck. He's having a good day. Steele nodded. Good days were precious now. Walter's heart had never fully recovered from the attack. Each day was a gift they didn't take for granted. He found Walter in his favorite chair, looking out at the neighborhood he'd helped transform. At 81, Walter had slowed down considerably, but his mind was sharp as ever. Marcus, Walter's face lit up. Sit with me. Steele settled into the chair beside him. Emma climbed into her grandfather's lap. Grandpa, tell me the story again, about when Daddy was a stranger. Walter chuckled. Again? I've told you that story 100 times. I like it. Walter looked at Steele, and something passed between them that didn't need words. Well, once upon a time, there was a house that got knocked down by a storm, and an old man who couldn't fix it, and a young man on a motorcycle who stopped to help, even though everyone told him not to. And then what happened? Walter pulled Emma close. Then something magical happened. The young man and the old man became family. They fixed the house together. They fixed the town together. And most importantly, they fixed each other, Emma finished. I remember that part. That's right, Princess. Walter kissed her forehead. They fixed each other, and they lived happily ever after. Emma wriggled down and ran back inside to find more cookies. Steele and Walter sat in comfortable silence. You know, Walter said quietly, I've been thinking about the end. Steele's chest tightened. Walter, let me finish. I'm 81. I've had a heart attack. I'm not stupid. Walter's voice was peaceful, not morbid. But I want you to know something. When my time comes, and it's coming, son, whether we like it or not, I want you to be okay. I don't want to talk about this. Too bad, we're talking about it. Walter reached over and took Steele's hand. You gave me 4 extra years, Marcus. 4 years I shouldn't have had. 4 years to watch you get married, to meet my granddaughter, to see the man you become. Walter, please. I'm not afraid to die. I made my peace with death a long time ago, in Vietnam. But I am afraid of leaving you before I've said everything I need to say. Walter's eyes were intense. So listen carefully. Steele forced himself to meet the old man's gaze. You are not defined by your past. You are not defined by your mistakes. You are not defined by what people say about you, or the patch on your vest, or the record in some courthouse file. Walter's grip tightened. You are defined by what you do, how you treat people, the choices you make when no one's watching. I know. You are defined by stopping when you could have kept riding, by lifting when you could have walked away, by loving when you had every reason to stay closed off. Walter's voice cracked. You are defined by being my son, Marcus, and that is the greatest thing you will ever be defined by. Steele broke. He bent forward and pressed his forehead to Walter's hand, sobbing like he had that first week when all the walls had come down. I'm scared, he admitted. I'm scared of losing you. I know. I'm scared of leaving you too. Walter stroked Steele's hair with his trembling hand. But here's the thing about family, son. It doesn't end when someone dies. It doesn't end when hearts stop beating. It goes on, in memories, in lessons, in the love we pass to the next generation. He lifted Steele's chin. You have Grace now. You have Emma. You have Diesel and Hawk and Torch and 300 volunteers who look to you for leadership. Walter smiled through his own tears. You have an entire community that exists because you stopped one morning to help two old strangers. That's your legacy, Walter, not mine. No, Walter shook his head firmly. That's our legacy, yours and mine, together. And when I'm gone, it becomes yours to carry forward, to expand, to share with every person you meet who needs to know that stopping matters, that helping matters, that family is what you build, not what you're born into. Steele sat up and looked at the man who had given him everything. I love you, Dad. It was the first time he'd used that word. The first time in his entire life he'd called anyone Dad. Walter's face transformed. Joy and grief and love all mixed together in an expression Steele would never forget. I love you too, son. Walter pulled him close. I love you too. They held each other as the sun set over Willowbrook, as Eleanor called them in for dinner, as Emma ran back out to drag them both to the table. Family, not the one Steele was born into, not the one society said he deserved, the one he chose, the one that chose him back. The bronze plaque was installed on the Morrisons' front porch on the 5-year anniversary of the tornado. Steele and Grace stood with their children, Emma, now 5, and 2-year-old Tommy, named for the son Walter and Eleanor had lost. The inscription read, Where one act of kindness rebuilt more than a house, it rebuilt a community, dedicated to Walter and Eleanor Morrison, and to all who believe that stopping to help a stranger is the highest form of service. Walter had passed peacefully 8 months earlier, with Eleanor and Steele at his bedside. His last words were simple. Keep building, son. Keep stopping. Keep loving. Now Eleanor stood beside Steele, her hand in his, reading the plaque that honored her husband's memory. He would have loved this, she said softly. He would have complained it was too much fuss. Steele smiled through his tears. Then he would have secretly loved every minute. That's exactly right, Eleanor laughed. That's exactly who he was. The crowd gathered behind them, 300 volunteers, dozens of families they'd helped, politicians and journalists and ordinary people who'd come to witness history being made. Sheriff Clayton approached with a folded flag. Mrs. Morrison, on behalf of the state of Tennessee and the families of Willowbrook, we'd like to present you with this flag in honor of Walter's service and sacrifice. Eleanor accepted it with trembling hands. Thank you. He would have been so proud. Ma'am, he was proud. Every single day. As the ceremony concluded and the crowd dispersed, Steele found himself alone on the porch he'd helped rebuild 6 years ago. The same porch where he'd sat with Walter that first night. The same porch where he'd learned what family really meant. Grace found him there an hour later, their children asleep in the car. You okay? Yeah, Steele looked at the plaque one more time. I was just thinking about something Walter said, near the end. What? He said family doesn't end when someone dies. It goes on, in memories, in lessons, in the love we pass to the next generation. Steele turned to face his wife. I think I finally understand what he meant. Grace took his hand. What do you think he meant? I think he meant that everything we do matters. Every choice, every act of kindness, every time we stop for someone who needs help. Steele's voice strengthened. Walter stopped for me when I was a stranger. He gave me a family. He gave me a future. He gave me you. He looked out at the neighborhood, transformed, thriving, alive with community and connection. And now it's my turn to stop for the next person, to give them what Walter gave me, to pass on the love he taught me how to receive. Grace leaned into him. He'd be proud of you. I know, Steele smiled. That's what gives me the courage to keep going. Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. Daddy, Grandma Eleanor says it's time for cake. Steele lifted his daughter into his arms and carried her toward the house, where his story had begun and Walter's story had ended, and a new story, their story, continued to unfold. Because that's what family is. Not blood, not obligation, not accident of birth. Family is stopping when you could keep riding. Family is lifting when you could walk away. Family is loving when you have every reason to stay closed off. And family is what Marcus Steele Thompson finally found on a dusty road in Tennessee when he saw an old man crying in the ruins of his house and made the only choice that ever really mattered. He stopped, and in stopping he built something that would last forever. Not a house, not an organization, not a legacy. A family. The kind you choose, the kind that chooses you back, the kind that changes everything.